3 days, Derek. You've got 3 days to prove you deserve to keep your own daughter." The words echoed in Derek Mitchell's mind as he gripped the steering wheel of his aging Honda Civic, the leather cracked and worn beneath his calloused fingers. He had been repeating that sentence to himself like a prayer, or maybe a curse, for the past 16 hours, as he bounced between his 2 jobs, trying to scrape together enough money to convince a judge that a man who worked himself to the bone was somehow a better parent than a woman who had abandoned her family for powder and parties. The dashboard clock glowed 11:47 p.m. in sickly green digits, and Derek's eyes burned with the kind of exhaustion that coffee could not touch anymore. His body ached in places he did not know could ache. His shoulders knotted from 8 hours hunched under car hoods at Riverside Auto Garage, his feet throbbing from another 8 hours, carrying plates and forcing smiles at the Moonlight Diner. Somewhere between the transmission fluid and the Table 7's complaint about cold fries, he had stopped feeling human and started feeling like a machine running on fumes and desperation. The custody papers sat on his passenger seat, their crisp white edges mocking him in the darkness. Monica's signature sprawled across the bottom of the petition. Confident and careless, the handwriting of a woman who had never had to fight for anything in her life because her parents' money had always fought for her. Her lawyer's letterhead gleamed with the kind of embossed professionalism that screamed expense, the kind of legal firepower that Derek's overworked public defender could not hope to match. Derek caught his reflection in the rearview mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. At 34, he looked closer to 45, with dark circles carved beneath his hazel eyes and a jaw that had not seen a proper shave in 3 days. His brown hair, once his best feature, according to Monica back when she used to notice things about him, now fell limp and unwashed across his forehead. He looked like exactly what Monica's lawyer would call him, a man barely holding on a father who worked too much and provided too little a cautionary tale about what happens when you marry above your station. But none of that mattered. Not really. What mattered was Lily. What mattered was his 6-year-old daughter with her mother's blonde curls and her father's stubborn chin. The little girl who still believed in Lucky Charms and bedtime stories, and the absolute certainty that her daddy would never let anything bad happen to her. The first raindrops hit his windshield like warnings, fat and heavy, exploding against the glass with surprising force. Derek flicked on his wipers, watching them struggle against the sudden onslaught as the sky opened up and the storm descended with a fury that seemed almost personal. Lightning cracked across the horizon, illuminating the rural highway in strobing white flashes, and thunder followed so close behind that the whole car seemed to shudder. Derek just wanted to get home. He wanted to climb those creaky stairs to his second-floor apartment, the one with the peeling wallpaper and the radiator that clanged like a dying animal every winter. He wanted to find Lily asleep on the couch where she always waited for him, no matter how many times he told her to go to bed. He wanted to brush the hair from her face and kiss her forehead and remind himself in that quiet moment why he was killing himself day after day. Because she was worth it. She was worth every aching muscle and every sleepless night and every moment of grinding, relentless exhaustion. She was the only thing in his life that had ever been purely perfectly good. 3 days until Judge William Crawford would sit behind a polished wooden bench and decide whether Derek Mitchell deserved to remain a father. 3 days until a stranger in a black robe would weigh his love against Monica's lawyers and determine which one tipped the scales of justice. Derek pressed harder on the accelerator, eager to outrun the storm, eager to get home, eager to hold his daughter one more time before the world tried to take her away. He had no idea that the next few minutes would change everything. Before we continue, Please tell us, where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel." The rain intensified until Derek could barely see 10 feet in front of his headlights, the world reduced to a blur of gray and black, punctuated by the violent white flashes of lightning. He had slowed to a crawl on the 2-lane highway, his wipers groaning in protest as they fought a losing battle against the deluge, when his headlights caught something that made his foot instinctively find the brake. 2 figures stood beside a black Mercedes SUV on the shoulder of the road, their silhouettes barely visible through the curtain of rain. As Derek's car crept closer, the figures resolved into shapes he could recognize: 2 young women. Teenagers, maybe waving their arms in the universal gesture of distress. They were soaked through their clothes, plastered to their shivering bodies, their faces masks of fear and desperation. Derek's first instinct was to keep driving. He had his own problems, more problems than any one person should have to carry, and stopping for strangers on a dark highway in the middle of a storm was exactly the kind of thing that got people into trouble. His rational mind listed all the reasons to press the accelerator and disappear into the night. It could be a trap he did not have time for. This someone else would surely stop. He needed to get home to Lily. But then lightning flashed again, and in that moment of brilliant illumination, Derek saw their faces clearly. Young faces. Frightened faces. Faces that reminded him with painful clarity of how Lily looked when she woke from a nightmare and called out for him in the darkness. He thought about his daughter, imagined her stranded somewhere, with no one stopping, no one caring, no one willing to interrupt their own problems long enough to help a scared child. Derek pulled over. The rain hit him like a wall of cold needles the moment he stepped out of his car, instantly soaking through his work shirt and running in rivulets down his face. He jogged toward the Mercedes, his work boots splashing through puddles that had formed on the asphalt. And as he got closer, he could see the 2 girls more clearly. They were twins, identical in nearly every way, with dark hair that hung in sodden ropes around their pale faces, and eyes that widened with a mixture of hope and caution as he approached. They looked to be about 15, dressed in expensive clothes that were now ruined by the storm, their designer jackets doing nothing to stop the shivers that racked their slender frames. One of them clutched a dead phone in her hand, like it might somehow spring back to life if she just held it tight enough. "Car trouble," Derek called out over the roar of the storm, raising his voice to be heard above the thunder. The girl on the left nodded frantically, her teeth chattering so hard Derek could hear them from 5 feet away. "It just died on us," she said, her voice high and frightened. "We have been here for over an hour. Our phones are dead, and nobody stopped, and we did not know what to do, and we were so scared that nobody would ever come." Her sister, slightly quieter, but with sharper eyes that studied Derek with careful assessment, added, "Until you. You are the first person to actually stop." Derek glanced at their car. A Mercedes SUV that probably cost more than he would earn in the next 5 years combined. The irony was not lost on him that he, driving a Honda Civic held together by prayers and duct tape, was the one stopping to help 2 girls whose family could clearly afford a fleet of luxury vehicles. "Mind if I take a look under the hood?" he asked, already moving toward the front of the SUV. "Please," both girls said at once, their voices overlapping in identical desperation. "Please, if you can help at all, we will be so grateful." Derek popped the hood and leaned in, squinting through the rain as he examined the engine. Years of working at Riverside Auto had given him an almost instinctive understanding of cars, and it did not take long for him to identify the problem. The battery terminals were corroded, the connections loose, and poorly maintained, the kind of issue that wealthy people who paid others to handle their maintenance often overlooked until it stranded them somewhere inconvenient. "Your battery is shot," he announced, closing the hood and turning back to face the twins. "You are not going anywhere tonight, not without a jump or a tow, and neither one of those is happening in this storm." The girls exchanged worried glances, a silent communication passing between them in the way that only twins can manage. "We can call our father," the more talkative one said, but her voice carried a note of doubt that spoke volumes. "He is probably busy, though. He is always busy." Something in the way she said it made Derek pause, a familiar resignation wrapped in disappointment. He recognized that tone, because he had heard it in his own voice once back when Monica had started disappearing into her new friends, and her late nights back when he had still been foolish enough to make excuses for her absence. "Look," Derek said, making a decision that his exhausted body protested, but his conscience demanded, "I can give you a ride somewhere safe. There is a hotel about 15 minutes from here, the Riverside Inn. You can dry off, warm up, and call for a tow in the morning when the storm passes." The quieter twin narrowed her eyes slightly. "You would do that for us? We are complete strangers. You do not know anything about us." Derek shrugged, rain streaming down his face. "Cannot leave you out here in this. Come on, grab your bags and let us go before we all catch pneumonia." The twins gathered their belongings and climbed into Derek's Honda Civic, and even through his exhaustion, he noticed the way they hesitated. Before getting in the way, they looked at each other, as if silently debating whether this stranger could be trusted. He did not blame them for their caution. The world had taught young women to be careful, and two teenagers alone on a dark highway had every reason to be suspicious of a man offering rides. But whatever reservations they had, they overcame them, likely, because the alternative was standing in the rain indefinitely. The contrast between them and their Mercedes was almost comical as they settled into his beat-up car. The passenger seat had a spring that poked through the worn fabric, and the back seat still bore coffee stains from a spill Derek had never quite managed to clean. The whole vehicle smelled faintly of motor oil, and the pine tree air freshener dangling from his mirror, a far cry from the leather and new car smell they were probably accustomed to. But neither girl complained. They just looked relieved to be out of the rain, their shivering bodies gradually calming as the car's struggling heater pushed warm air through the vents. "I am Olivia," the one in the passenger seat announced, as Derek pulled back onto the highway, his wipers working overtime against the relentless downpour. "And this is my sister Bella. We are really, really grateful you stopped. You have no idea how scared we were." Derek nodded, keeping his eyes fixed on the barely visible road ahead. "I am Derek," he offered simply, "and you do not have to keep thanking me." Anyone would have stopped. But that is the thing, Bella said from the back seat, her voice carrying that same observational sharpness he had noticed before. Anyone did not stop. "We counted at least 30 cars that drove right past us like we were invisible. You are the only one who actually cared enough to pull over." The car fell into silence for a moment, filled only by the drumming of rain on the roof and the rhythmic swish of the wipers. Then Olivia spoke again, her voice softer now, almost hesitant. "You said you cannot leave us out there. That seems like a really kind thing for a stranger to do. Most people are not like that anymore." Derek was quiet for a moment, considering how much to share with these girls he had just met. But something about the intimacy of the storm, the enforced closeness of the car, the shared experience of being caught in something beyond their control, made honesty feel easier than deflection. "I have a daughter," he finally said. "She is 6 years old, her name is Lily, and she is the whole reason I get up every morning. If she was ever stranded somewhere scared and alone in a storm like this, I would want someone to stop for her. I would pray that some stranger would care enough to help my little girl, when I could not be there to protect her myself. Olivia turned in her seat to look at him, her eyes filled with a warmth that had not been there before. "That is really beautiful," she said. "Lily is lucky to have a dad like you." Derek's jaw tightened involuntarily, the mention of his daughter bringing all his fears rushing back to the surface. "Every chance I get," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "I try to be the best father I can, which might not be for much longer." He had not meant to say that last part. It just slipped out, the weight he had been carrying, finally finding a crack to escape through, and once the words were in the air, he could not take them back. "What do you mean?" Bella asked from the back seat, leaning forward between the front seats with sudden interest. Derek gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles going white. "Her mother and I, we are divorced. She is trying to take full custody of Lily. Says I am not fit to be a father because I work too much. Do not make enough money. Cannot provide the kind of life her family thinks Lily deserves." "That is horrible," Olivia whispered, genuine sympathy coloring her voice. "That is absolutely horrible. Working hard to support your daughter should not count against you. It is what it is," Derek said, though his voice betrayed the fear and anger he tried so hard to suppress. "I am doing everything I can. 2 jobs, saving every penny, showing up to every school event, even when I am so tired I can barely see straight. But sometimes, it feels like it is not enough. Like the world has already decided I'm not good enough, and nothing I do will ever change that." The car fell silent again. But this time, the silence felt different, heavier, filled with shared understanding rather than awkward discomfort. Finally, Bella spoke, her voice soft but intense. "Our father is like that too, always working. We barely see him anymore. He has all the money in the world, literally more money than he could ever spend in 10 lifetimes. But we would trade it all just to have dinner with him once a week, without him checking his phone every 5 minutes. He thinks providing means everything." Olivia added, quietly staring out the rain-streaked window at the darkness beyond. "He thinks that giving us a nice house and nice clothes and nice cars makes up for the fact that he is never there. He does not understand that we just want him. Just him, present, paying attention to us instead of his work." Derek glanced at her, seeing a reflection of his own struggles in her words, just from the opposite direction. "You should tell him that," he suggested gently. "He should know how you feel. We have tried." Bella said, a bitter edge creeping into her voice. "He does not listen. Says we do not understand what it takes to maintain our lifestyle. Like we care about the lifestyle more than we care about having an actual father." "Sounds lonely," Derek observed. "It is," Olivia admitted. "Money does not fix loneliness. It just makes it more comfortable." They drove in silence for a while longer, the storm raging around them, but the interior of the car feeling strangely peaceful. Derek thought about Lily, about the custody hearing, about how he was fighting so desperately to keep his daughter, while these girls were fighting just as desperately to be seen by a father who was already there, but somehow absent. "You seem like a good dad," Bella said. Eventually, breaking the silence with words that hit Derek harder than she could have known. The kind who stops in a storm. The kind who shows up. Derek's throat tightened with emotion. "I am trying to be," he managed. "I am really trying." "That is more than most people do," Olivia said. "And Lily is going to remember that, no matter what happens. She is going to remember that her dad tried." The Riverside Inn appeared through the rain, its neon sign flickering in the storm, like a beacon of warmth and safety. Derek pulled into the parking lot and stopped near the entrance, reluctant for reasons he could not quite name to let these two strangers disappear from his life. The twins gathered their things, and before she got out, Olivia turned to him one last time. "Thank you, Derek," she said, her voice filled with genuine warmth. "Really, truly thank you. You did not have to help us, but you did, and we will never forget that." She paused, seeming to debate something internally, then added, "I hope the judge sees what we see, that you are exactly the kind of father your daughter needs." "Me too," Derek said quietly. "Me too." He watched them run through the rain toward the hotel lobby, two girls who had reminded him in the most unexpected way why he was fighting so hard. Then he put his car in gear and drove back into the storm, his mind already returning to the battle that waited for him in 3 short days. Derek arrived at his apartment complex past midnight, the storm still raging, but his spirit oddly calmer than it had been in weeks. Something about helping those girls, about being reminded that kindness still mattered in a world that often felt cold and indifferent, had settled something in his soul. He parked in his usual spot, the one under the broken streetlight that always flickered but never quite went out, and climbed the creaky stairs to his second-floor unit. His keys felt heavy in his exhausted hand as he fumbled with the lock, and when the door finally swung open, he was greeted by the familiar sight of his tiny apartment. It was not much this place he called home. The living room and kitchen shared the same cramped space, separated only by a counter, cluttered with bills he could not pay, and coupons he had clipped in hope of saving a few precious dollars. The wallpaper was peeling in the corners, the carpet worn thin from years of tenants before him, and the radiator in the corner clanged every winter like it was trying to communicate in Morse code. But it was clean because Derek made sure of that. It was safe because he had checked every lock and smoke detector twice. And most importantly, it was filled with evidence of a life he had built with his daughter Lily's drawings, taped to the refrigerator, her toys arranged in a corner basket, her school schedule pinned to a corkboard next to the phone. Mrs. Dorothy, his 68-year-old neighbor, and the closest thing to family he had in this city, sat in the worn armchair by the window, a magazine open on her lap. But her eyes fixed on the couch where Lily lay sleeping. The older woman looked up as Derek entered her weathered face, creasing into a sympathetic smile. "She tried to wait up for you." "Yeah," Mrs. Dorothy whispered, standing slowly and gathering her things. "She always tries, bless her heart." But she could not keep her eyes open past 10. Derek's heart clenched as he looked at his daughter, curled up on the couch with a blanket pulled up to her chin and her favorite stuffed elephant tucked under her arm. Even in sleep, her face carried a tension that no 6-year-old should know, a worry that had crept into her features over the past months as the custody battle had intensified. "Thank you for watching her," Derek said, reaching into his pocket for the $20 bill he had set aside for Mrs. Dorothy. It was money he could not afford to spend, not with court costs and lawyer fees and all the other expenses piling up. But he could not ask her to sacrifice her evenings for nothing. Mrs. Dorothy waved his money away with a firm shake of her head. "Keep it, honey. You need it more than I do. That little girl needs a father who can put food on the table, not one who is giving his last dollar to an old woman who has more than enough." "I cannot just—" "Yes, you can," she interrupted gently. Her eyes filled with the kind of maternal warmth that Derek had not experienced since his own mother passed away 15 years ago. "You can, and you will save that money for Lily. Lord knows she deserves every penny you can scrape together." After Mrs. Dorothy left, Derek knelt beside the couch and brushed the hair from Lily's face. She stirred at his touch, her eyes fluttering open to reveal the same hazel as his own, and the smile that spread across her sleepy face made every hour of exhaustion worth it. "Daddy," she sat up and threw her arms around his neck, squeezing with all the strength her little body could muster. "You came home. I missed you so much." "I missed you too, baby," Derek said, holding her close and breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, the scent of innocence and childhood, and everything he was fighting to protect. "I am sorry I am so late. Work was crazy today." Lily pulled back and looked at him with eyes that suddenly seemed far too old for her age. "Daddy, are we going to be okay?" The question gutted him. She was 6 years old. She should be worrying about cartoons and playground games, not about whether her world was about to be torn apart. "We are going to be fine," he lied, pulling her into another hug so she could not see the fear in his eyes. "Everything is going to be just fine." But Lily was not finished. Her small voice trembled against his shoulder as she whispered, "Mommy says I might have to go live with her. She says you cannot take care of me good enough. She says her house is bigger and her food is better and you are too tired all the time." Derek held her tighter, fighting back the rage that surged through his chest at the thought of Monica filling their daughter's head with such poison. "Your mommy is wrong." "Lily," he said firmly, "I can take care of you. I will take care of you. No matter what happens in that courtroom, I am your dad, and I love you more than anything in this world. I do not want to leave you." Lily whispered, her tears soaking into his work shirt. "Please do not let me leave you, Daddy. You will not." Derek promised, making a vow he had no idea if he could keep. "I promise, baby. You are staying right here with me." They sat like that for a long time, father and daughter clinging to each other in a tiny apartment, while the storm raged outside. Finally, Lily pulled back and reached for something she had hidden under the couch cushion. "I made you something," she said, her voice still shaky, but her eyes bright with hope. "It is a lucky charm, Mrs. Dorothy said if you draw something with your whole heart, it becomes real." "So I drew really, really hard, Daddy." She pressed a piece of paper into his hands and Derek looked down at her creation. It was a crayon drawing, simple and childish and perfect, 2 stick figures holding hands, one big and one small, standing in front of a little house with a yellow sun shining overhead. Above the figures in wobbly letters, Lily had written, "Daddy and Lily forever." Derek's vision blurred with tears he could not stop. He pressed the drawing to his chest and pulled his daughter close one more time. "I love it," he whispered. "I'm going to keep it with me always. It will make the judge be nice to us," Lily said with absolute certainty, "because we drew it with our whole hearts." After Lily fell back asleep, Derek sat alone in the darkness of his apartment holding her lucky charm and staring out the window at the storm that still had not relented. In 3 days, he would walk into a courtroom and face Judge William Crawford, a man who would hold his entire world in his hands. He did not know yet that the seeds of something extraordinary had already been planted on a rain-soaked highway, that the twins he had helped were about to change everything. All he knew was that he would fight with everything he had. For Lily. Always for Lily. The Crawford estate sprawled across 3 acres of manicured grounds in the wealthiest neighborhood of the city, a monument to success that somehow felt more like a mausoleum than a home. Judge William Crawford's Mercedes pulled into the circular driveway at nearly midnight, his headlights illuminating the grand columns and massive windows of a house that had felt empty ever since his wife had died 5 years ago. William was tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. At 58, he had spent 30 years on the bench, 30 years of listening to families tear themselves apart, 30 years of trying to make decisions that would shape children's lives for better or worse. The weight of all those choices hung on his shoulders like a physical burden, and tonight, it felt heavier than usual. He let himself into the house and immediately noticed that the lights in the living room were still on. That was unusual. His daughters Olivia and Bella typically retreated to their separate corners of the massive house by this hour, each occupying their own wing of a home that could have comfortably housed 10 families. But tonight, both girls were waiting in the living room, sitting on the leather sofa that had cost more than most people's cars, their faces still bearing the traces of what looked like tears. William stopped in the doorway, something cold settling in his chest. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "Dad," Olivia said, standing quickly and moving toward him with an urgency he had not seen in years. "Something happened tonight. We need to tell you about it." William's mind raced through terrible possibilities as he lowered himself into the armchair across from them. He was accustomed to maintaining control, to keeping his emotions carefully compartmentalized behind the professional mask he wore in the courtroom. But something about his daughter's expressions cracked that facade. "Our car broke down on Highway 89. Bella explained, her voice steadier than her sister's, but her eyes just as intense. "We were stranded in that terrible storm for over an hour. Our phones died, and no one would stop." What William's composure shattered. "Why did you not call me? I would have sent someone immediately. I would have come myself." "Our phones were dead, Dad," Olivia said, and there was something in her tone that made William flinch. "We could not call anyone. We were completely alone, stuck on the side of the road in the worst storm I have ever seen, and car after car just drove past us like we did not exist." William's hands clenched into fists. He had failed them again. Even with all his money, all his power, all his influence, he had not been there when his daughters needed him most. But then someone stopped. Bella continued, and her voice softened in a way that caught William's attention. A man in this old, beat-up Honda Civic. He was clearly exhausted, clearly had his own problems, clearly had every reason in the world to keep driving. But he stopped for us anyway. William listened as his daughters described their rescue, painting a picture of a man named Derek, who had spent the evening helping 2 strangers when he had nothing to spare. They told him how Derek had checked their car, diagnosed the problem, and driven them to a hotel without asking for anything in return. They told him about their conversation in the car, about Derek's daughter Lily, about the custody battle that was consuming his life. "He works 2 jobs," Olivia said, her eyes filling with fresh tears. "2 jobs, Dad. And he still stops to help strangers in a storm. He still shows up for every school play and every parent-teacher conference. He is fighting so hard to keep his daughter, and all he wants is to be her dad." Bella leaned forward, her gaze locked on their father with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "He has a court hearing in 3 days. His ex-wife is trying to take his daughter away because she says he does not make enough money, does not have a nice enough house, cannot provide the right kind of life." William's blood ran cold as understanding began to dawn. "And you know what the saddest part is?" Bella continued, her voice cracking. "He kept apologizing to us, apologizing for his car being so old, apologizing for not being able to fix our Mercedes right there in the storm. Like he was embarrassed that he could not do more when he was already doing everything." The twins fell silent, and William sat frozen in his chair, his mind racing. He knew that name. He knew that case. Mitchell v. Mitchell had been on his docket for weeks, scheduled for his courtroom in exactly 3 days. The man who had saved his daughters from a terrifying night on a dark highway was the same man whose fate William would soon hold in his hands. "What is his name?" William asked, though he already knew the answer. "Derek Mitchell," Olivia said. Why William did not answer. He simply sat in silence long after his daughters had gone to bed, staring at the family portrait on the mantel, the one taken before his wife had gotten sick, the one showing a family that had once been whole. He thought about the man named Derek, working himself to exhaustion for his daughter. He thought about his own choices, the decades of prioritizing career over family, the distance that had grown between him and his girls, despite all the money he had given them. And he thought about what he would do when he walked into that courtroom in 3 days. The night before the custody hearing, Derek could not sleep. He sat at his tiny kitchen table at 2 a.m, surrounded by legal documents he barely understood, trying to prepare for a battle he felt desperately unequipped to fight. The suit he had bought from Goodwill hung on the back of a chair, its jacket slightly too big and its pants slightly too short, the best he could afford on a budget that was already stretched to breaking. He had spent nearly 3 hours trying to get the motor oil stains out of his fingernails, scrubbing until his hands were raw, but traces of black still lingered around his cuticles like accusations he could not erase. Derek practiced his answers in the bathroom mirror, watching his reflection mouth words that sounded hollow and rehearsed. "Your Honor, I am a good father." The man in the mirror looked tired, looked beaten, looked like someone who had already lost. Derek slammed his palm against the sink in frustration, the sound echoing off the tiny bathroom's walls. "Come on, Derek," he muttered to himself. "Get it together. Lily needs you to get it together." A small voice from the doorway made him spin around. "Daddy, are you okay?" Lily stood there in her unicorn pajamas, rubbing her eyes with small fists, her hair a tangled mess from sleeping. She looked tiny and vulnerable, and absolutely perfect, and the sight of her made Derek's chest ache with love so fierce it was almost painful. "I am okay, sweetheart," he said, forcing a smile. "Just nervous about tomorrow. Go back to bed." But Lily did not go back to bed. Instead, she padded across the cold floor in her bare feet and reached for his hand. "Come with me," she said, tugging him toward the living room. "I want to show you something." She led him to the couch where a piece of paper lay waiting, another one of her drawings. This one showed the same 2 stick figures as before, Daddy and Lily. But this time, they were standing in front of a building that Lily had labeled court in her wobbly handwriting. "This is for tomorrow," she explained, pressing the paper into his hands. "It is another lucky charm. The first one was for keeping us together, and this one is for making the judge be nice." Derek knelt down to her level, his eyes burning with tears he refused to let fall. "Baby, you do not have to worry about any of this. This is grown-up stuff, okay? You just need to be a kid. But I want to help." Lily insisted, her little face scrunched with determination. "Mrs. Dorothy says that love is the strongest magic in the whole world, and I love you the most of anybody, so my lucky charm has extra strong magic." Derek pulled her into a hug, breathing in the scent of her, memorizing the feel of her small body in his arms. "I love you too, Lily Bean," he whispered. "More than anything." "Then you will win," she said with absolute certainty. Because love always wins in the stories. Derek wished he could believe that. He wished the world worked the way it did in Lily's bedtime stories, where good triumphed over evil and love conquered all, and happy endings were guaranteed. But the world was not a bedtime story. The world was a place where good people lost and bad people won, and a man who had done nothing wrong could have his daughter stolen away because he did not have enough zeros in his bank account. Still, as he tucked Lily back into bed and kissed her forehead, Derek slipped both of her Lucky Charm drawings into the breast pocket of his thrift store suit. Maybe they would not help. Maybe they were just crayon and paper, the artwork of a 6-year-old who still believed in magic. But they were also proof of something real. Proof of a little girl's love. Proof of everything Derek was fighting for. And that at least was worth holding on to. Across town in a luxury apartment paid for by her parents' money, Monica Mitchell was also preparing for court, though her preparations looked very different from her ex-husband's. The apartment gleamed with expensive furniture and designer accessories, everything carefully curated to project an image of success and stability. But behind the polished surface, cracks were beginning to show. A half-empty bottle of wine sat on the kitchen counter. Pills rattled in a prescription bottle that Monica had hidden in her purse. And in the bedroom, her mother, Victoria Hamilton, was helping her select the perfect outfit for tomorrow's performance. The navy dress, Victoria decided, holding up a conservative ensemble that screamed responsible motherhood. You need to look like someone the judge would trust with a child. Elegant, but understated. Caring, but capable. Monica stared at her reflection in the mirror, barely recognizing the woman looking back. Once she had been beautiful in a wild, untamed way, the kind of beauty that drew men like moths to flame. Now at 33, she looked tired, beneath the careful makeup, her eyes holding an emptiness that no amount of designer clothes could fill. "Mother," she said, her voice carrying a note of uncertainty that Victoria immediately recognized and crushed. "Do not start," Victoria interrupted sharply. "We have invested too much in this to back out now. That lawyer cost your father and me a fortune. The apartment, the image, consulting, all of it. You are going to walk into that courtroom tomorrow and convince that judge that you are a changed woman who deserves her daughter back." But what if no buts? Victoria's eyes were cold, calculating, utterly devoid of maternal warmth. "You made your choices, Monica. You embarrassed this family when you ran off with those people and their parties and their drugs. You humiliated us when that mechanic divorced you instead of the other way around. This is your chance to fix it." Monica's hand trembled as she reached for the wine bottle, only to have Victoria snatch it away. "No more of that," Victoria hissed. "Not tonight. You need to be sharp tomorrow. Sympathetic, but not pathetic. Tearful, but not hysterical. The judge needs to see a mother who made mistakes, but has changed, not a woman who cannot go 8 hours without a drink. What if I do not want this?" The words slipped out before Monica could stop them, and the silence that followed was deafening. Victoria's expression shifted from cold to dangerous. "Excuse me." "Lily," Monica said, her voice barely above a whisper. "She is happy with Derek. She loves him. What if taking her away from him just makes everything worse?" Victoria laughed, a sharp, humorless sound that made Monica flinch. "Love." She spat the word like it was something disgusting. "Love does not pay for private schools. Love does not open doors to the right social circles. Love does not ensure that your daughter grows up to be something more than the child of a grease monkey who could not provide for his own family." She gripped Monica's shoulders and forced her to look in the mirror. "You listen to me," Victoria said, her voice low and intense. "That man took you away from everything you could have been. He got you pregnant and trapped you in a life that was beneath you. The only good thing that came out of your unfortunate marriage is Lily, and she deserves better than growing up in a tiny apartment with a father who is too exhausted to even stay awake at her school plays." "He has never missed a school play," Monica said quietly. "He shows up for everything." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Then we will make the judge see that showing up is not enough. We will make him see that Derek Mitchell can offer presence, but not prosperity, attention, but not opportunity. And we will make him understand that a child needs more than a tired father who can barely pay his bills. After Victoria left, Monica sat alone in her expensive apartment surrounded by beautiful things that felt like prison bars. She reached into her purse and pulled out the prescription bottle, shaking 2 pills into her palm before swallowing them dry. She thought about Lily, about the little girl she had carried for 9 months and then abandoned without looking back. She thought about Derek, about the man who had loved her once, who had tried so hard to save her from herself, who had finally had to choose between fighting for her and protecting their daughter. For just a moment, guilt flickered in her chest. But then the pills kicked in, numbing the sharp edges of her conscience, and Monica Mitchell began to rehearse her lines for tomorrow's performance. She would be the star of her own redemption story, the poor mother who had lost her way, but found it again. It did not matter that none of it was true. All that mattered was winning. Derek woke at 5 in the morning to the sound of rain against his window, a gentler rain than the storm 3 nights ago, but rain nonetheless. He lay in bed for a moment, staring at the water-stained ceiling, trying to convince his exhausted body that it was time to face the most important day of his life. His sleep had been fitful at best, maybe 2 hours total, interrupted by nightmares of judges and gavels, and Lily being pulled from his arms. Every time he had closed his eyes, he had seen Monica's smug face, her parents' cold triumph, a courtroom full of people who looked at him and saw nothing but failure. But there was no more time for sleep. Today was the day. Derek showered and shaved carefully, nicking himself twice because his hands would not stop trembling. He put on the ill-fitting suit from Goodwill, adjusting the too big jacket and trying to pretend the too short pants were not obvious. He tucked Lily's Lucky Charm drawings into his breast pocket, feeling their paper edges against his chest like armor against the world. Mrs. Dorothy arrived at 7 to take Lily to school. She had offered to keep the little girl home to spare her the anxiety of a normal day while her father fought for their future, but Derek had insisted on maintaining routine. "She needs normal," he had explained. "She needs to believe that no matter what happens, life goes on." Now, as he watched Mrs. Dorothy help Lily into her coat, Derek knelt down to his daughter's level and took her small hands in his. "I have to go somewhere important today," he said, keeping his voice steady, despite the fear clawing at his chest. "Mrs. Dorothy is going to pick you up from school and stay with you until I get home. I might be late, but I promise I'm coming back." Lily's eyes were huge and worried, far too knowing for a 6-year-old. "You are going to the court place," she said. It was not a question. "The place where they decide if I have to leave." Derek's throat tightened. "Yes, baby. But I want you to know that no matter what happens in that room, I love you. I love you more than anything in the whole universe, and nothing will ever change that." Lily threw her arms around his neck and squeezed with all her might. "You have my lucky charms," she whispered. "So you are going to win. I know you are." Derek held her for a long moment, memorizing the feel of her embrace, the smell of her strawberry shampoo, the sound of her voice. "I love you, Lily Bean. I love you too, Daddy." And then Mrs. Dorothy was leading her out the door, and Derek was alone in his empty apartment facing the most terrifying day of his life. The courthouse loomed like a monument to justice as Derek approached its marble columns and massive steps, making him feel small and insignificant. He had driven past this building hundreds of times over the years, never giving it more than a passing glance. Now it felt like the gates of heaven and hell combined, a place where his fate would be decided by people who did not know him, did not love Lily, did not understand what it meant to fight for your child with everything you had. He spotted Monica's car in the parking lot, a sleek BMW that her parents had bought for her court day. Beside it stood Monica herself, looking polished and composed in a navy dress that probably cost more than Derek's entire wardrobe. Her lawyer, a sharp-suited man named Holloway, who had made his reputation destroying fathers in custody cases, was reviewing documents while Monica's parents stood nearby like generals surveying a battlefield. None of them acknowledged Derek as he passed. Monica did not even look at him, treating him like he was invisible, like he had already ceased to exist. Mr. Mitchell. Derek turned to find his own lawyer hurrying toward him, slightly out of breath and clutching a battered briefcase. Mr. Patterson was in his 50s, overworked and underpaid, a public defender who juggled more cases than any one person should handle. He was a decent man and a competent attorney, but Derek could see the concern in his eyes as they approached the courthouse steps together. "How are you feeling?" Mr. Patterson asked. "Terrified," Derek admitted. "Is that the wrong answer?" "It is the honest answer. Look, I want to be straight with you. Their lawyer is good, one of the best in the city. He is going to hit hard on the financial angle the hours you work the size of your apartment. We need to counter with everything. We have got your character witnesses, your school involvement, your relationship with Lily. And if that is not enough, Mr. Bess," Patterson was quiet for a moment. "Let us hope it is enough," he finally said. "Let us hope the judge can see past the money to what really matters." They climbed the steps together and entered the building, leaving the morning light behind for the dim, intimidating interior of the courthouse. The courtroom smelled like old wood and decades of human drama. Derek took his seat at the defendant's table, his hands clasped so tightly in his lap that his knuckles had gone completely white. Mr. Patterson shuffled through papers beside him, occasionally muttering legal phrases that Derek did not understand, his presence more comforting than his words. Across the aisle, Monica sat with perfect posture, her face a mask of composed concern. Holloway looked predatory in his expensive suit, a shark who had scented blood in the water. And behind them, Monica's parents sat like spectators at a gladiator fight, waiting to witness the defeat of a man they had always considered beneath their daughter. Derek tried to calm his racing heart, tried to remember everything Mr. Patterson had told him about staying composed and letting the evidence speak. But his eyes kept drifting to the empty bench at the front of the room, the throne from which a stranger would pronounce judgment on his entire life. "All rise," the bailiff announced suddenly. "The Honorable Judge William Crawford presiding." Derek stood on legs that felt like they might give out at any moment, his heart hammering so loud he was certain everyone could hear it. This was it. This was the moment that would determine everything. The door behind the bench opened, and Judge William Crawford entered the courtroom. He was tall and distinguished, with silver hair and sharp eyes that swept across the room with the authority of 3 decades on the bench. His black robe billowed slightly as he moved, adding to the impression of power and gravitas that seemed to emanate from his very presence. Derek watched the judge settle into his seat, waiting for those sharp eyes to scan the case file, waiting for this stranger to begin dismantling his life. And then Judge Crawford looked up, and their eyes met. Derek's blood ran cold. He knew that face. Not from any courtroom, not from any previous meeting. He knew it from 3 nights ago in the rain on a dark highway. He knew it from the features he had seen reflected in 2 young women who had been stranded and scared and desperate for help. The judge's daughters, Olivia and Bella. This was their father. The man who would decide whether Derek kept Lily was the father of the girls he had rescued from the storm. For a moment, neither of them moved. Recognition passed between them, like electricity silent, and charged with implications that Derek could not begin to process. The odds of this coincidence were astronomical, impossible, and yet here they were facing each other across a courtroom with everything on the line. Judge Crawford's expression remained perfectly professional, betraying nothing of the recognition that had clearly registered in his eyes. He opened the case file and began to read, his voice steady and authoritative. "Good morning. We are here today for the custody hearing of Lily Marie Mitchell. Counselors are both parties ready to proceed." "Yes, Your Honor," Holloway said smoothly, rising with the confidence of a man who expected to win. "Ready, Your Honor," Mr. Patterson added. Though his voice lacked the same conviction, Judge Crawford nodded slowly, but something seemed to shift in his expression. He studied the case file for another moment, and Derek could see the wheels turning behind those sharp eyes. "Before we begin," the judge said, "I would like to call a brief recess. 20 minutes. We will reconvene shortly." The bailiff looked confused but nodded. "All rise." Everyone stood as Judge Crawford exited through the back door, his robe swirling behind him like a storm cloud. Holloway leaned over to whisper urgently to Monica, his expression annoyed. Monica's mother looked suspicious, her eyes narrowing as she watched the door through which the judge had disappeared. Mr. Patterson turned to Derek with concerned eyes. "That is unusual," he said quietly. "Something is happening. Did you recognize the judge? Have you seen him before?" Derek could not answer. His mind was racing, trying to understand what this meant. The judge knew who he was now. He knew about the storm, the rescue, the kindness Derek had shown to strangers. But was that good? Would it help his case? Or would the judge feel obligated to recuse himself? Would another judge be worse? Someone without any connection to Derek at all. 10 minutes crawled by like hours every second, stretching into eternity. Then the bailiff approached Derek's table, his expression carefully neutral. "Mr. Mitchell, the judge, would like to see you in his chambers." The words fell like stones into the silent courtroom. Holloway was on his feet immediately. "Excuse me, on what grounds?" "We object to any private communication between the judge and the opposing party." "Just Mr. Mitchell," the bailiff repeated firmly, ignoring the lawyer's outrage. "Please follow me, sir." Derek stood on shaky legs, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst through his chest. Mr. Patterson grabbed his arm as he passed, his voice low and urgent. "Whatever he asks you, be honest. Do not try to be clever. Do not try to manipulate. Just be honest. That is all you can do." Derek nodded and followed the bailiff through a side door, down a narrow hallway that smelled of old book and furniture polish, and into a wood-paneled office that spoke of decades of legal authority. Judge William Crawford stood by the window of his chambers, his hands clasped behind his back, staring out at the city below. He did not turn when Derek entered, and for a long moment, the only sound was the soft ticking of an antique clock on the wall. "Sit down, Mr. Mitchell." Derek lowered himself into one of the leather chairs, facing the massive desk, feeling like a schoolboy called to the principal's office. His heart hammered against his ribs, and Lily's lucky charm drawings rustled against his chest with every breath. Finally, the judge turned to face him. Up close, the resemblance to Olivia and Bella was even more striking. The same sharp eyes, the same strong jawline features that had been reflected in two frightened faces on a rain-soaked highway. Judge Crawford sat down behind his desk and folded his hands on the polished surface, his expression unreadable. 3 nights ago, he began, his voice measured and careful. "My daughters called me from a hotel. They were stranded on Highway 89 in that terrible storm. Their car had broken down, and they had been there for over an hour alone, and scared while car after car drove past without stopping. Derek's mouth went dry. He wanted to speak, to explain, to say something, but the words caught in his throat. No one helped them. The judge continued. No one cared. They were two young women alone in the dark in the rain, and nobody thought they were worth stopping for. He paused, his eyes boring into Derek's with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. Except you. Your Honor, Derek finally managed, his voice rough with emotion. I did not know who they were. I swear I did not plan any of this. I had no idea they were your daughters until I saw you walk into that courtroom just now. I know you did not. That is exactly my point. Judge Crawford leaned back in his chair, some of the formal rigidity leaving his posture. My daughters told me about you, Mr. Mitchell. They told me how you were clearly exhausted, clearly struggling, clearly had every reason in the world to keep driving. But you stopped anyway. You took time you did not have to help strangers who could not offer you anything in return. Derek did not know what to say, so he said nothing. They told me about your daughter. The judge continued. About Lily. About this custody battle you are fighting. They said the way you talked about her, the way your whole face changed when you mentioned her name, it was obvious how much you love that little girl. I do, Derek whispered. I love her more than anything in this world. I believe you, and that creates a dilemma for me, Mr. Mitchell. Derek's stomach dropped. You are going to recuse yourself. No, Judge Crawford said, and Derek's head snapped up in surprise. I am not. But let me explain. The judge's voice took on a weight that commanded attention. I should recuse myself. By every standard of judicial ethics, I have a personal connection to you now that could be seen as bias. Another judge would not have that complication. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. But I also know something about myself that another judge would not. I know that I am fair. I know that I have spent 30 years on this bench trying to make decisions based on facts, not feelings. And I know that I spent all night reviewing your case file, looking at every piece of evidence, every accusation, every document that has been submitted to this court. Derek barely dared to breathe. Your ex-wife claims you are financially unstable, that you work too much, that you cannot provide a proper home for Lily. But here is what I found interesting, Mr. Mitchell. She has provided no evidence of neglect, no evidence of abuse, no evidence that Lily is anything other than loved and cared for by a father who would do anything for her. The judge's eyes softened almost imperceptibly. What she has provided is a lot of opinions about what a father should be able to afford, a lot of assumptions about what constitutes a proper home, a lot of arguments that have nothing to do with what actually matters, whether you are a good parent to your child. Derek's eyes burned with tears he refused to let fall. I also received a report this morning, Judge Crawford continued from social services. It seems someone filed a concern about Mrs. Mitchell's fitness as a parent, and an investigation was conducted. Derek's heart stopped. The report documents 2 arrests for drug possession charges dropped on technicalities, but arrests nonetheless. It documents her termination from employment for intoxication. It documents ongoing concerns about substance abuse. The judge pulled a folder from his desk and slid it toward Derek. This is the official documentation. It was submitted to the court this morning entirely independent of our connection. Any judge would have received this information, and any fair judge would consider it carefully. Derek stared at the folder like it might explode. Why are you telling me this? He asked, his voice breaking. You could have just presented it in open court. You did not have to explain anything to me. Judge Crawford was quiet for a moment, something shifting in his expression. 3 nights ago, he said finally, my daughters told me something I was not ready to hear. They said I was never there when they were growing up, that I chose work over them. that they would trade all my money and success for a father who actually showed up. The admission hung in the air between them, raw and honest. They were right, the judge continued. I have spent 30 years building a career, and somewhere along the way, I lost my family. My wife died 5 years ago, and instead of turning to my daughters, I buried myself even deeper in work. I have been physically present and emotionally absent, and I have missed more of their lives than I can ever get back. He looked at Derek with something like respect. But you, Mr. Mitchell, you work 2 jobs. You are exhausted to the point of collapse. You have every excuse in the world to cut corners, to miss events, to prioritize survival over presence. And yet you show up. Every parent-teacher conference, every school play, every bedtime story. His voice grew thick. My daughters told me that Lily talks about you constantly. About the bedtime stories you make up for her, about the park you take her to every Sunday, about how you teach her to be kind. They said she is a happy child who loves her father. Derek could not hold back the tears anymore. They spilled down his cheeks, and he did not even try to wipe them away. I am going back out there, Judge Crawford said, standing from his chair. And I am going to conduct this hearing fairly and impartially. The evidence will be presented, arguments will be made, and I will render a judgment based on what is best for Lily. He walked toward the door, then paused. But I want you to know something, Mr. Mitchell. Whatever happens in that courtroom, it is not about the storm. It is not about my daughters. It is about what is right for a 6-year-old girl who deserves to be with a parent who loves her. His voice softened. My daughters asked me to tell you that Lily is lucky, that she has the kind of father they wish they had had growing up. The judge opened the door. They were right. Let us go finish this. Derek walked back into the courtroom feeling like he had been through a war and come out the other side. His legs were still shaky, his heart still racing, but something had changed. For the first time in months, he felt something he had almost forgotten. Hope. All rise, the bailiff called, and Judge Crawford took his seat with the same professional composure he had shown before. Whatever had passed between them in chambers was invisible now, locked away behind the judicial mask that came with the black robe. We will now hear opening statements, the judge announced. Mr. Holloway. You may proceed. Monica's lawyer rose with the confidence of a predator who had already tasted victory. He painted a picture of Derek as a man drowning in his own inadequacy, too poor to provide stability, too exhausted to be present, too stubborn to admit that his daughter deserved better. Your Honor, Holloway concluded, the law requires us to consider what is best for the child. Lily Mitchell deserves a home where she can thrive, not merely survive. She deserves opportunities that Mr. Mitchell simply cannot provide. Her mother has the resources the family support and the desire to give Lily the life she deserves. Mr. Patterson's response was quieter, but no less powerful. Your Honor, he said, love is not measured in square footage. It is not calculated by bank account balances or the value of a car. Derek Mitchell may not have much in material terms, but he has given his daughter something that money cannot buy. A father who shows up. Character witnesses were called. Lily's teacher described a man who never missed an event, who volunteered for field trips, despite working double shifts, whose daughter lit up like a sunrise every time he walked through the door. Mrs. Dorothy took the stand and spoke about watching Derek work himself to exhaustion night after night, only to come home and read Lily bedtime stories until she fell asleep, only to wake up early and make her breakfast before the cycle started again. Derek's boss at the garage testified that in 3 years, Derek had never once failed to show up, but had also never once failed to mention his daughter, never once failed to find a way to attend her school events, never once prioritized anything over being Lily's father. Through it all, Monica sat with practiced composure, her face a mask of sympathetic concern. When it was her turn to testify, she delivered a performance worthy of an award. Tears in her eyes as she spoke of her regrets, her voice breaking as she described wanting to make things right, her whole demeanor projecting the image of a reformed woman who deserved a second chance. But Derek could see the truth beneath the facade. He had lived with this woman for years. He knew what her real tears looked like, and these were not them. He knew what genuine remorse sounded like, and this was rehearsed. Still, it was working. He could see it in the way Holloway smiled, the way Monica's parents nodded approvingly, the way even Mr. Patterson's expression grew worried. Then Judge Crawford spoke. Before we continue, the judge announced the court has received new information relevant to this case, information that was not disclosed by the petitioner's counsel. Holloway was on his feet immediately. Your Honor, what information we were not notified? Sit down, Mr. Holloway. Judge Crawford's voice was steel. You were not notified because your client deliberately concealed it. The courtroom seemed to freeze. Monica's composed facade cracked for just a moment, revealing the panic beneath. Mrs. Mitchell, the judge said, looking directly at her. You have presented yourself to this court as a stable, responsible parent, seeking to protect her daughter from an unfit father. But you failed to mention your 2 arrests for drug possession. You failed to mention being terminated from your employment for intoxication. You failed to mention that you are currently under investigation for substance abuse. The courtroom erupted. Holloway was objecting loudly. Monica was shaking her head with tears streaming down her face, and Victoria Hamilton looked like she might murder someone with her bare hands. But Judge Crawford remained calm. The charges were dropped on technicalities he acknowledged, but the arrests are on record. The drug tests are still positive. The witness statements are still documented. He held up the folder from social services. This is a full investigation completed by social services submitted to this court through proper channels. It is all here. Derek watched as his ex-wife crumbled as the carefully constructed facade came apart at the seams. There was no satisfaction in it, only sadness for what could have been, only grief for the woman he had once loved, and the family they had once hoped to build. Judge Crawford's gavel came down, silencing the chaos. This court will take a brief recess to review the documentation. When we reconvene, I will deliver my ruling. The 20-minute recess stretched like an eternity. Derek sat at the defendant's table, his hands folded in his lap, trying to process everything that had just happened. Patterson was beside him, explaining in low tones how the evidence had come to light. The chain of events was almost miraculous in its timing, a series of coincidences that had aligned to expose the truth. Mrs. Dorothy's daughter. It turned out worked as a nurse at the local hospital. She had recognized Monica from news coverage of the custody case and remembered treating her twice in the emergency room for what had been documented as anxiety attacks, but were actually overdoses. Ethically conflicted, but driven by concern for a child she had never met, she had reported her concerns to social services. The investigation had moved quickly, uncovering the arrests that Monica's expensive lawyers had managed to bury the job termination that had been covered up with a generous severance package, the ongoing substance abuse that continued even as Monica prepared to testify about her fitness as a parent. All of it had been compiled into a report that arrived at the courthouse the morning of the hearing, entirely independent of Derek's connection to Judge Crawford, entirely coincidental in its timing, entirely devastating in its implications. Derek thought about Monica, about the woman he had married nearly 7 years ago. She had been different then. Or maybe he had just been too blind to see who she really was. Wild and exciting, yes, but also lost in ways he had not understood. He had thought he could save her. He had thought love would be enough. But some people did not want to be saved. Some people ran from help as fast as they ran toward destruction. And in the end, the only thing Derek could save was Lily. Across the aisle, Monica was huddled with her lawyer, and her parents, their conversation intense and angry. Victoria Hamilton kept shooting venomous glances in Derek's direction, as if he were somehow responsible for her daughter's choices, as if the truth were an attack rather than simply the truth. Monica herself looked small and diminished. The confident mask completely gone now. For just a moment, her eyes met Derek's, and he saw something there he had not expected. Not hatred, not anger, but something almost like relief. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. She had not wanted this. Not really. She had been pushed into the custody battle by her parents, driven by their need for control and their hatred of the man who had dared to divorce their daughter. Monica was a pawn in her own family's game, manipulated by people who saw Lily not as a child to love, but as a prize to win. It did not excuse anything she had done. It did not make her fit to be a mother. But it did make Derek feel something unexpected pity. All rise. Judge Crawford returned to the bench, his expression solemn. The courtroom fell silent, every person holding their breath, as the judge opened the folder before him. "I have reviewed the evidence submitted to this court," he began, his voice carrying the weight of 3 decades of judicial experience. Both the testimony presented today and the social services documentation that was submitted this morning. He looked at Monica first, his eyes filled with something that might have been compassion. Mrs. Mitchell, addiction is a disease. It is not a moral failing, and it is not something to be ashamed of. But it is something that must be addressed, especially when a child's welfare is at stake. The evidence before me suggests that you are currently struggling with substance abuse issues that have not been adequately treated. Then his gaze shifted to Derek. "Mr. Mitchell, the evidence also shows that despite financial challenges and demanding work schedules, you have maintained a consistent, loving presence in your daughter's life. Every witness who testified today spoke of a father who prioritizes his child above all else." Judge Crawford paused, and the courtroom seemed to hold its collective breath. "This court finds that Lily Mitchell's best interests are served by remaining with her father." The words hit Derek like a wave washing over him with such force that he nearly collapsed. He gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white, his whole body trembling. "I am awarding full custody of Lily Marie Mitchell to her father, Derek Mitchell." The judge continued. "Ms. Mitchell will be allowed supervised visitation contingent upon completion of a rehabilitation program and ongoing sobriety." The gavel came down with a sound like thunder. "This hearing is adjourned." Derek could not move. He sat frozen at the table. Judge Crawford's words echoing in his mind like a song he had waited his whole life to hear. Full custody. Lily was his. She was staying with him. Mr. Patterson was shaking his hand, saying something about how unprecedented. This was how lucky they had been. But Derek barely heard him. His attention was fixed on the empty bench at the front of the room, where a stranger in a black robe had just given him back his entire world. Across the aisle, Monica was sobbing in her mother's arms, but Victoria's face showed more teeth than comfort. Holloway was already gathering his things, probably planning an appeal that would go nowhere now that the truth was on record. Derek watched his ex-wife cry, and he felt no triumph, no satisfaction, no vindication. He felt only exhaustion and relief and an overwhelming need to hold his daughter. Mr. Mitchell. Derek looked up to find the bailiff standing beside him. You are free to go, the bailiff said. Congratulations. Derek stood on shaky legs, his vision blurry with tears. He had finally stopped fighting. He looked toward the door behind the bench, hoping to catch one more glimpse of Judge Crawford. But the judge was already gone. There was so much Derek wanted to say, so much gratitude burning in his chest that words could not contain. But the moment had passed. The judge had done what he had promised to do, render a fair verdict based on the facts. The rest was up to Derek. He walked out of the courthouse into brilliant sunshine. The storm from 3 nights ago felt like a lifetime ago now, like something that had happened to a different person in a different world. Everything felt transformed. The air, the light, the weight on his shoulders. His phone buzzed. Mrs. Dorothy. How did it go? Derek's voice cracked as he answered. I won, Mrs. Dorothy. Lily is staying with me. Her tears were audible through the phone, mixing with laughter and prayers of thanks. Oh, thank God. Thank God. Derek, Lily has been so worried. She kept asking if you were coming back, if she was going to have to leave. Tell her I am coming home right now, Derek said, his hand already reaching for his car keys. Tell her we are going to celebrate. Tell her the lucky charm worked. He practically ran to his car, his hands shaking so badly he could barely get the key in the ignition. The drive home blurred together streets and traffic lights, and turns he made on autopilot, his mind filled with only one thought: Lily. When Derek burst through the apartment door, Lily was sitting on the floor with her coloring books, her small body tense with worry, her eyes searching his face for answers. Daddy Derek dropped to his knees so hard, the thin carpet barely cushioned the impact. He did not care. He opened his arms wide, and Lily crashed into him like a blonde-haired comet, her tiny fists clutching his jacket so tight he could feel her nails through the fabric. She smelled like strawberry shampoo and grape juice, and the particular sweetness of childhood. Her body shook against his 6 years old, and carrying the weight of fears no child should ever know. Daddy, she sobbed into his neck, saying his name over and over like a prayer, like if she repeated it enough times, he would not disappear. Daddy, Daddy, Daddy. Derek buried his face in her hair and let himself cry, really cry the way he had not allowed himself in months. Great heaving sobs that came from somewhere so deep he had not known it existed, releasing all the fear and exhaustion and desperation he had been holding back. I am here, baby, he managed between breaths. I am here. I am not going anywhere. Not ever. Not ever. You are staying with me. Lily pulled back to look at him, her cheeks wet with tears, her eyes huge with hope and fear. Forever, forever, sweetheart. You are mine, and nothing is ever going to change that. The judge said you get to stay right here with Daddy. The lucky charm worked, she asked, her voice small and wondering. Derek reached into his pocket and pulled out the crumpled drawings, now damp with his own tears. It worked, he confirmed. Your magic was stronger than anything. Lily threw her arms around his neck again, squeezing with all the strength her little body could muster. I told you, she whispered. I told you love always wins in the stories. Mrs. Dorothy stood in the doorway, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. I will give you two some time, she said softly, and slipped away. For a long while, father and daughter just sat there on the floor of their tiny apartment, holding each other, crying and laughing and crying again. The cramped rooms that Monica's lawyers had called inadequate felt like a palace, the worn furniture like thrones, the water-stained ceiling like a cathedral dome. None of it mattered. Only This has mattered. Only Lily. Eventually, the tears subsided, and Lily pulled back with a sniffle. "Daddy." "Yeah, baby." "Can we have ice cream?" she asked. Her voice still shaky, but her eyes bright with the resilience of childhood. To celebrate, Derek laughed a real, genuine laugh that felt like it came from somewhere he had thought was dead. "We can have all the ice cream you want, Lily Bean. We can have ice cream for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, if that is what you want." They walked hand in hand to the small ice cream shop 2 blocks away, the one with the red awning, and the owner who always gave Lily extra sprinkles. She got chocolate with rainbow sprinkles, and gummy bears, her favorite combination. Derek got vanilla, and they sat at the little table by the window, watching people walk by, just being together. "Daddy," Lily said between bites, "what made the judge be nice to us?" Derek thought about the storm, about 2 girls standing in the rain, about making a choice to stop, when every logical part of him had screamed to keep driving. "I helped some people," he said slowly, "when they needed it. And I guess kindness came back to us in ways I did not expect." "Like karma?" Lily asked. She had learned that word from a cartoon. "Yeah, baby." Derek smiled. "Like karma. Like the Lucky Charm magic," she corrected. "Because I drew it with my whole heart." Derek looked at his daughter, at this perfect little person who believed in magic and lucky charms and the power of love to conquer anything. Maybe she was right. Maybe that was exactly what it was. Exactly like the Lucky Charm magic, he agreed. "You saved us, Lily Bean." She grinned, chocolate smeared on her chin. "I know. That is what Lucky Charms do." 2 weeks after the custody hearing, life had begun to settle into something resembling normal. Derek still worked his 2 jobs, still came home exhausted every night, still counted every penny. But everything felt different now, because the fear was gone. Lily was his legally and permanently, and no one could ever take her away. He was cleaning up after dinner one evening, Lily working on homework at the kitchen table, when his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, and Derek almost let it go to voicemail before something made him answer. "Mr. Mitchell." "This is William Crawford." Derek's heart stuttered. "Your Honor, please call me William. I am not wearing the robe right now." Derek stepped away from the kitchen, lowering his voice so Lily would not hear. "I do not know how to thank you," he said, "for everything." "What you did, I did my job," Judge Crawford interrupted gently. "I reviewed the evidence and made a decision based on the facts. Any fair judge would have done the same." "Still," Derek said, "thank you." There was a pause on the line, and when the judge spoke again, his voice was different, warmer, less formal. "Actually, Mr. Mitchell's Eric, I am calling because my daughters have not stopped talking about you. They want to thank you properly for helping them that night in the storm. We were hoping you might join us for dinner this Saturday. You and Lily, of course." Derek did not know what to say. The invitation felt surreal, like something from a dream rather than real life. "I know it might feel strange," Judge Crawford continued, "given the circumstances of how we met. But the court case is closed. Whatever happened in that courtroom is behind us. Now, we are just 2 fathers, and my girls are very persistent when they want something." Derek found himself smiling despite his uncertainty. "I know something about persistent daughters. Then you understand my position. Saturday at 7, I will have Olivia text you the address, and Derek. Bring your appetite. My daughters have been planning the menu for 2 days." That Saturday, Derek borrowed a tie from his neighbor and helped Lily pick out her best dress, the yellow one, with sunflowers that she had been saving for special occasions. They drove to an address in the hills where the houses had gates and the driveways could fit 10 of Derek's car. Lily pressed her nose against the window, her eyes wide with wonder. "Daddy, is this a castle?" Derek laughed. "Not quite, baby, but it is pretty close." The Crawford estate was impressive, intimidating in its grandeur. But the moment the front door opened, all the formality melted away. "You came." Olivia pulled Derek into a hug before he could even say hello. "We were so worried you would say no." "Of course we came," Derek replied, slightly overwhelmed by her enthusiasm. Bella was right behind her sister, her sharp eyes immediately finding Lily. "And you must be the famous Lily. Your dad told us all about you." Lily hid behind Derek's leg, suddenly shy in the presence of these tall, elegant teenagers. But Bella just smiled and knelt down to her level. "I am Bella. Do you want to see our game room? We have every video game ever made. Well, almost every video game." Lily looked up at Derek for permission. He nodded, and she tentatively took Bella's outstretched hand, allowing herself to be led into the massive house. Judge Crawford appeared at the top of the stairs, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, looking nothing like the imposing figure who had presided over Derek's case. "Derek," he said warmly, descending to shake his hand. "Welcome to our home." "Thank you for inviting us," Derek replied, still slightly dazed by the surreal turn his life had taken. They made their way toward the living room, and that was when Derek saw her. A woman stood by the window, her back to them, as she adjusted a vase of flowers. She turned at the sound of their approach, and Derek's breath caught in his throat. She was beautiful in a way that seemed almost unreal. Long blonde hair cascaded over her shoulders in soft waves. She wore a red dress that managed to be elegant and approachable, at the same time highlighting a figure that was slender but strong. Her eyes were green warm and intelligent, and when she smiled, it was like the whole room got brighter. Judge Crawford said, "This is my goddaughter, Charlotte Hayes. She has been a family friend since she was a girl. I asked her to join us for dinner." Charlotte extended her hand, and when Derek took it, he felt something stir in his chest that he had not felt in years. "It is nice to meet you, Derek," Charlotte said. "Olivia and Bella have told me so much about you. You are something of a hero around here." "I am no hero." Derek managed, acutely aware of how underdressed he must look compared to her. "I just did what anyone would do." Charlotte's smile widened. That is exactly what a hero would say. Dinner that first Saturday was a revelation. The Crawford house was grand, filled with expensive furniture and artwork that probably cost more than Derek would earn in a lifetime. But despite the opulence, there was an emptiness to the space, a coldness that spoke of rooms that were never used, and conversations that never happened. Until tonight. Tonight, the dining room was filled with laughter and conversation, and the kind of chaos that only happens when people are genuinely enjoying each other's company. Lily had emerged from her shyness within an hour, drawn out by Olivia and Bella's infectious enthusiasm. By the time dinner was served, she was chattering away about her school and her friends, and her favorite cartoons, with both teenagers hanging on every word. She asked if she could call you her big sisters. Olivia told Derek across the table, her eyes shining. "Is that okay?" Derek looked at his daughter, who was currently teaching Bella some complicated handshake she had learned on the playground. "If she wants to," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She has never had siblings before." "Neither have we," Bella said. "Not really. We had each other, but we always wanted a little sister." Judge Crawford watched the interaction with an expression Derek could not quite read. There was warmth there, certainly, but also something like regret, like a man seeing for the first time all the things he had missed. And then there was Charlotte. She had been seated next to Derek, and throughout the meal they had fallen into easy conversation. He learned that she was 32, a year older than him, and that she taught art at Riverside Elementary School. "Wait," Derek set his fork, pausing halfway to his mouth. "Riverside Elementary." "That is where Lily goes." Charlotte's eyes widened. "You are kidding. What grade? First grade. Her teacher is Mrs. Patterson." Charlotte laughed, a sound like bells that made Derek's heart do something unexpected. "I know Mrs. Patterson. I am the art teacher for the lower grades. I probably have Lily in my class." The coincidence felt almost too perfect to be real, but when they compared schedules, it turned out to be true. Charlotte had been teaching Lily for months without either of them knowing the connection. "She is wonderful," Charlotte said, her voice soft with genuine affection. "So creative and kind. She made me a drawing last week of a rainbow with all the colors in the wrong order. When I asked her about it, she said it was a surprise rainbow because surprises are more fun." Derek felt tears prick at his eyes. That sounds like my girl. As the evening wore on, Derek found himself relaxing in a way he had not in years. The conversation flowed naturally, touching on everything from childhood memories to favorite books to the challenges of single parenting. Because Charlotte, it turned out, understood those challenges better than most. I was engaged once, she told Derek later, when the others had moved to the game room and they were alone on the back patio. 2 years ago. His name was James. "What happened?" Derek asked gently. "Car accident." Charlotte said, her voice steady, but her eyes distant. He was coming home from work, and a drunk driver ran a red light. He died before the ambulance even arrived. Derek did not say anything. He just reached out and took her hand, knowing that sometimes presence was more important than words. I threw myself into teaching after that. Charlotte continued. The kids kept me going. Their joy, their creativity, their absolute belief that the world is a beautiful place. They reminded me that there was still good in the world, even when everything felt dark. She squeezed his hand, and then I heard about you, about what you did for Olivia and Bella, about the custody case and how hard you fought for Lily, and I thought maybe there are still good people out there. Maybe hope is not dead. Derek looked at her. This beautiful woman in the red dress who understood loss and loneliness and the desperate need to keep going for the sake of someone else. Maybe we were supposed to meet, he said softly. Maybe this whole crazy chain of events happened for a reason. Charlotte smiled, and something passed between them. An understanding, a connection. The first tentative spark of something that might grow into more. Maybe it did, she agreed. Maybe it did. The Saturday dinners became a tradition, an anchor point in weeks that still held their share of challenges. Derek continued working his 2 jobs, continued counting every penny, continued coming home exhausted every night. But now there was something to look forward to. A light at the end of each tunnel, a reminder that he was not alone. Every Saturday, he and Lily would drive to the Crawford estate, where Olivia and Bella would sweep his daughter away into their world of games and makeovers and sisterly bonding. Judge Crawford William, as Derek now called him, would pour drinks and ask about Derek's week with genuine interest. And Charlotte would be there, her presence, like a warm blanket on a cold night. Their relationship developed slowly, carefully, both of them carrying wounds that required gentle handling. On the 3rd Saturday, they went for a walk in the garden, while the others watched a movie. "Tell me about her," Charlotte said. "Your ex-wife. I want to understand." Derek was quiet for a long moment, gathering his thoughts. "Monica was fire when I met her," he finally said. "Wild and beautiful and exciting. I was just a mechanic who had never been anywhere or done anything, and she was this force of nature who made everything feel possible. He kicked at a pebble on the path. I did not see the warning signs. The way she would disappear for hours without explanation. The mood swings. The friends, who seemed to appear out of nowhere. I thought I could love her enough to fix whatever was broken inside her. But you could not, Charlotte said gently. No, nobody could. She had to want to fix herself, and she did not. When I found the drugs, when I realized what was really going on, I had to choose between trying to save her and protecting Lily. You chose Lily. I will always choose Lily, Derek said simply. She is everything. Charlotte stopped walking and turned to face him. The moonlight caught her hair, turning it silver. I think that is why I am drawn to you, she said softly. You know how to love completely. You know how to put someone else's needs before your own. That is rare, Derek. That is precious. Derek reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I could say the same about you. The way you talk about your students, the way you have thrown yourself into being there for Olivia and Bella, the way you still believe in good things even after everything you have lost. They stood there in the moonlight, two wounded people recognizing in each other the possibility of healing. I am scared, Charlotte admitted. I have not let myself care about anyone since James. I am afraid that if I do, if I let myself hope again, something will take it away. Derek took her hands in his. I am scared too, he said. I have been hurt, and I have seen how loving someone can tear you apart. But I am more scared of never trying again. I am more scared of spending the rest of my life alone, because I was too afraid to take a chance. Charlotte smiled through tears. So what do we do? She asked. Derek thought about the storm, about the choice he had made to stop when he could have kept driving. We take it one day at a time, he said. We are honest with each other. We move at whatever pace feels right, and we see where it goes. Charlotte squeezed his hands. I can do that, she said. I think I would like to do that. On the 6th Saturday, when they thought no one was watching, they kissed for the first time on the patio under the stars. It was gentle and tentative and full of promise, the kiss of two people who had learned to be careful with their hearts, but were choosing to be brave. Inside, pressed against the glass door, 3 faces watched with barely contained glee. Finally, Olivia whispered, I thought they would never figure it out. The months that followed were filled with the slow, beautiful work of building a life together. Derek got a job offer through William's connections, a position at a better garage with proper benefits and reasonable hours. He almost refused it, his pride bristling at what felt like charity. I cannot take handouts, he told William one evening. I need to earn things myself. William fixed him with a level stare. It is not a handout. It is a recommendation. I told the owner you were the best mechanic I had ever met, and he agreed to interview you. What happens after that is up to you. Derek went to the interview. He got the job on his own merits, and for the first time in years, he was not working himself to death just to survive. The relationship with Charlotte deepened naturally without pressure or expectation. They went on dates when they could stolen hours between his work schedule and her teaching. They brought Lily to parks and museums and the ice cream shop with the red awning. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, learning each other's stories, each other's scars, each other's dreams. Lily adored Charlotte, a fact that became clear the first time she introduced her to her classmates. This is Miss Charlotte, she announced proudly during show and tell. She is my daddy's special friend, and she makes really good pancakes, and she is going to be my new mommy someday. Charlotte had turned bright red. Derek had nearly choked on his coffee when she told him the story later. I did not know what to say. Charlotte admitted, laughing and embarrassed. She was so confident about it, like it was already decided. Derek pulled her close. Kids know things, he said. Maybe she is onto something. As for William, the change in him was remarkable. The workaholic judge, who had spent decades choosing career over family, had begun to choose differently. He showed up for dinners. He attended Olivia and Bella's college events. He took Lily to the park and taught her to ride a bike in his massive backyard, something he had never done with his own daughters. One afternoon, Derek found him sitting on the patio watching Lily chase butterflies in the garden. "I miss this with my girls," William said, without preamble. "I told myself I was providing for them, that my work was important, that they would understand when they were older. But they did not need my money. They needed me." Derek sat down beside him. "You are here now," he said. "That is what matters." William shook his head. "Is it enough can showing up now make up for all the years I was not there?" Derek thought about his own journey, about the fear and the struggle, and the way love had somehow carried him through. "I do not know," he admitted, "but I know that trying matters. I know that change is possible, and I know that your daughters love you, even if they are still hurt by the past." William was quiet for a long moment. "You taught me that you know," he finally said. "That night in the storm, when you stopped for my girls, when you had nothing to spare, but gave everything anyway, that is when I started to understand what I had been missing." He turned to look at Derek. "I have sat on that bench for 30 years. I have seen thousands of cases, but yours taught me more than all of them combined. What did it teach you? That character is not what you do when people are watching. It is what you do in a storm when no one would blame you for driving past." Derek thought about that night, about the rain and the darkness and the choice he had almost not made. "I almost did not stop," he admitted. "I was so tired, so beaten down. I almost kept driving." William smiled. "But you did not. That is what matters. You stopped." 1 year after the storm that changed everything, Derek drove Charlotte to a stretch of Highway 89 that she did not recognize. "Where are we going?" she asked, watching the dark road unfold before them. Derek did not answer. He just kept driving until he reached a spot he had memorized, a spot where the highway curved slightly and the shoulder widened into a small pull-off area. He parked and turned off the engine. "This is where it happened," he said quietly. "This is where I stopped for Olivia and Bella." Charlotte looked at the unremarkable stretch of road, trying to see it through his eyes. "Everything changed right here," Derek continued. "I made a choice probably without even thinking about it, and that choice led to William, to the custody case, to you." He turned to face her. "Charlotte, I have spent most of my life just trying to survive, working myself to exhaustion, fighting to keep my daughter, never daring to hope for anything more than getting through another day." Charlotte's breath caught as she saw him reaching into his pocket. "But then I stopped in a storm, and everything got better. I got Lily, really got her in a way that no one can ever take away. I got a family in William and the girls, and I got you." He pulled out a small box and opened it, revealing a ring that was not expensive, but was perfect, a simple diamond that caught the moonlight and sparkled like a promise. "I know I am not rich," Derek said, his voice rough with emotion. "I know I cannot give you fancy things, or a big house, or a life without struggle. But I can give you my whole heart, Charlotte. I can give you every ounce of love I have. I can promise to show up every single day for the rest of my life." Charlotte was crying, tears streaming down her face as she looked at the ring and then at the man holding it. "This spot, this stretch of road, it is where I learned that one choice can change everything. So I am asking you to make a choice too, Charlotte." Hayes, will you marry me? Charlotte did not hesitate. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes. Yes, 1,000 times. Yes. Derek slipped the ring on her finger, and they kissed on that dark stretch of highway, two wounded people who had found their way to wholeness together. When they finally pulled apart, Charlotte was laughing through her tears. You know, she said, Lily told her whole class this was going to happen. Derek grinned. Like I said, kids know things. The wedding was small and perfect, held in the backyard of the Crawford estate on a sunny afternoon 6 months after the proposal. Charlotte wore a simple white dress that made her look like something from a dream. Her blonde hair was adorned with wildflowers, and when she smiled at Derek across the makeshift aisle, he forgot how to breathe. Judge Crawford officiated, his voice steady, but his eyes suspiciously bright. We are gathered here today. He began to celebrate the union of two people who found each other in the most unlikely circumstances. Two people who learned that one act of kindness can ripple outward into something beautiful. Olivia and Bella stood as bridesmaids, beaming at the couple with the satisfaction of matchmakers whose plan had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. And Lily, Hecious Lily in her flower girl dress, walked down the aisle with such careful concentration that everyone had to fight not to laugh, carrying a basket of petals and scattering them with meticulous precision. When she reached the front, she looked up at Charlotte with shining eyes. Hi, Mommy. She whispered the word, slipping out naturally, as if she had been saying it all her life. Charlotte's composure cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she knelt to embrace the little girl who had claimed her heart from the very beginning. Hi, baby, she whispered back. I love you so much. I love you too, Lily said. I drew you a lucky charm for the wedding. It is in Daddy's pocket. Derek reached into his jacket and pulled out the drawing, a crayon masterpiece showing 4 stick figures holding hands. Daddy, Mommy, Lily, and a yellow sun overhead. She made it this morning, Derek said, his voice thick. She said, now the family is complete. William cleared his throat, clearly fighting his own emotions. With that, he said, I believe we have rings to exchange. The vows were simple and from the heart. Derek promised to love, honor, and show up. Charlotte promised to be patient, to be present, to choose their family every single day. And when William pronounced them husband and wife, the small gathering erupted in cheers that probably scared the birds from the trees. Mrs. Dorothy was there dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief and muttering about how she always knew that boy would find happiness. The owner of the ice cream shop had provided the wedding cake, a towering creation covered in rainbow sprinkles, because Lily had insisted. And when the dancing started, Derek held his new wife close and thought about all the storms that had led to this moment. We made it, he whispered. Charlotte smiled against his shoulder. We made it, she agreed. Together. 2 years after the storm, Derek Mitchell's life had transformed in ways he had never dared to dream. They lived in a modest house now, one they had bought together, with careful savings and help from William, who had insisted it was an early inheritance for his honorary grandchild. It was not mansion, but it was theirs, with a backyard where Lily could play, and a kitchen where Charlotte made pancakes on Sunday mornings, and a living room that was always full of laughter. On this particular Sunday, the whole family had gathered a tradition that had solidified over the years. Olivia and Bella, home from college for the weekend, were teaching Lily a complicated dance they had learned. Charlotte was pulling a roast from the oven, while Derek set the table. And William sat in the corner armchair, watching the chaos with a contentment that would have been unthinkable 3 years ago. Daddy Lily came running her 8-year-old legs, carrying her faster than seemed possible. Miss Olivia says I am a natural. Can I take dance lessons? Derek scooped her up, marveling at how big she had gotten. How the baby he had fought so hard to keep was becoming a young girl right before his eyes. We will see, Lily Bean. Let us talk about it later, okay? That means yes, Lily announced confidently. I can always tell. The table was loud and full plates passed, and stories shared, and love present in every word and gesture. Derek looked around at the faces gathered there, his wife, his daughter, the teenagers, who had become sisters, the judge who had become a father figure. After dinner, when the dishes were done, and the girls had settled in front of a movie, Derek stepped out onto the back porch. The evening was warm, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink. William joined him a moment later. You know, the older man said quietly, I have been on the bench for 30 years. Seen thousands of cases. Broken families, put back together, torn apart, rebuilt in new configurations. Derek waited, sensing there was more. But yours, William continued, turning to look at him. Yours taught me more than all of them combined. What did it teach you? That character is not what you do when people are watching. It is what you do in a storm when no one would blame you for driving past. Derek pulled out his wallet and extracted a worn, creased piece of paper. The original Lucky Charm Lily had drawn the night before his custody hearing. The stick figures had faded, but the message was still clear. Day and Lily forever. Except now there were more figures. Over the years, Lily had added to the drawing Charlotte in her wedding dress, Olivia and Bella with their long hair, William with his serious face. A family built not by blood, but by choice. She made this the night before court, Derek said. Told me if you draw something with your whole heart, it becomes real. He looked at the drawing, at the crude but perfect representation of everything he held dear. I guess she was right. From inside, Lily's voice rang out. Daddy, the scary part is coming. You have to hold my hand. Derek tucked the drawing back into his wallet and smiled. Coming, baby. He paused at the door, looking back at the sky one more time. The same sky that had held that terrible storm now held stars and possibilities, and the promise of tomorrow. Sometimes the smallest choices change everything he thought. One decision to stop instead of driving past. One moment of kindness to strangers who needed help. That is all it takes. He walked inside where his daughter immediately grabbed his hand and pulled him onto the couch. Charlotte settled against his other side, her head on his shoulder. The movie played something animated and silly, and Lily's giggle mixed with the sounds of the family she had always deserved. Derek Mitchell had learned something in that storm 2 years ago, something he would carry with him for the rest of his life. Sometimes the people you save become the people who save you. And sometimes, when you choose kindness over convenience, when you stop, instead of driving past the universe, chooses you right back. Friends, if this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring more heartwarming stories like this one to you every week. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that kindness matters, that showing up matters, that one small choice can change everything. Tag a friend, send it to a family member, or post it on your social media. You never know whose day you might brighten or whose hope you might restore. And remember, the next time you see someone stranded in a storm, the next time you have a chance to help, when it would be easier to drive past, take that chance. You never know whose life you might save, including your own. Thank you for watching, thank you for being part of our community, and we will see you in the next story.